Japan is changing its foreign policy strategy to unveil plans for its biggest military buildup since World War II. They made this huge decision to toss off 6 decades of relative pacifism, increasing their defense budget by double. Japan's western flank now sees risk and threat, and for the first time, the exercise called Iron Fist is said to name China as the hypothetical enemy. Though the threat is real, military cooperation between the two countries is at the top of the agenda. Of course, in the background, tensions with China are never far from the mind. Japan and the US have teamed up against China in the most aggressive way possible. America and Japan stand firmly together in the face of aggressive and coercive actions by the Communist Chinese. Recently, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth made a big announcement. A new warfighting base is going to be built in Japan. During this announcement, he dropped the coldest line ever. Those who long for peace must prepare for war. Now you know how serious this announcement is. The U.S. already has over 120 military bases in Japan, so what makes this new upgrade so special, and how will it help counter rising Chinese aggression? Hegseth made 3 major announcements during his tour to Japan. First, that the U.S. is recommitting to Japan. Second, the U.S. will send more troops to Japan. And third, a new warfighting command will be established in Japan. While all 3 of them are bad news for China, the third one is really pissing them off the most. According to Hegseth, this joint force headquarters will help Japan and the U.S. keep China in check and discourage it from even considering any aggressive moves in the Indo-Pacific. This is a major upgrade to the United States Forces Japan, USFJ, which is the U.S. military presence responsible for Japan's defense. Traditionally, the USFJ focused on administrative and logistical roles, but now it is being transformed into a joint operational headquarters designed to improve real-time command and response capabilities. This will help strengthen coordination between Japan and the U.S. to counter China in the Indo-Pacific. So, unlike the traditional USFJ, the new base will operate as a command center that will help with real-time decision-making and combat readiness. But that's not the real pain for China. What really stings China is the power U.S. forces could gain in Japan. In fact, Hegseth's visit pissed off China so much that just a few days after the visit, China's PLA launched massive joint drills around Taiwan without any warning. It wouldn't be wrong to call it a preparation for war considering the scale of this exercise: 76 aircraft, over 20 Navy and Coast Guard ships, including the mighty Shandong aircraft carrier group, surrounding Taiwan's main island. China also doesn't like people talking about Taiwan as if it's an independent country. In fact, the CCP gives money to countries that toe the CCP line regarding the Taiwan issue and punishes countries that recognize Taiwan as a sovereign nation. The CCP's 50-cent army even dislikes videos that talk about Taiwan in a positive manner. That's why you guys can help us by doing us a big favor and hitting the like and subscribe button down below. It helps out the video tremendously against these Chinese bots. Thanks a lot. But why was China so frustrated? You see, Japan has more than 55,000 U.S. troops stationed across Japan, who are scattered over 120 military bases. By the way, Japan hosts the largest American military presence outside of the U.S., and all of these come under one unit, which we already saw, the USFJ. Until now, they were only training Japanese forces, they were not meant to launch attacks. But now things might change soon. As part of this change, the U.S. is setting up a new War Room Command in Tokyo. This move gives more operational control and is expected to give the U.S. commander in Japan the authority to launch combat missions from Japanese bases with the help of the Japanese military. This upgraded command will be based at Yokota Air Base in Fusa, Tokyo. Instead of building something entirely new, the U.S. is reorganizing and enhancing what already exists. But once a wise man said, there are no permanent friends or enemies in geopolitics, only permanent interests. So, what the U.S. is doing in Japan is not a free service. In fact, Trump even gave the biggest shocker to Japan when he said this, and I love Japan. We have a great relationship with Japan. But we have to protect Japan. But under no circumstances do they have to protect us. I actually ask, who makes these deals? Trump says he loves Japan, but he is also dissatisfied with the U.S. protecting Japan. In short, Trump loves Japan, but as a friend, if you know, you know. So why did he say this, and what was he mentioning exactly? Trump was referring to the 1960 U.S.-Japan Security Treaty under which the U.S. is obligated to defend Japan, but Japan doesn't offer the same security guarantees in return. So, this was a fact but not entirely accurate. You see, Japan pays an average of 211 billion yen or around $1.8 billion each year for U.S. forces stationed in the country. But this money isn't the reason why the U.S. is protecting Japan. The actual reason is much better than you think. The reason why Trump cannot end this deal. It turns out that it was just his normal mood swings, and he isn't actually ending this deal. The reality is the U.S. is focusing on making Japan stronger. Again, the reason isn't friendship but geopolitics. The answer lies in Japan's growing importance as a strategic ally in the Indo-Pacific region. This move would sharpen coordination between the U.S. and Japanese forces, especially in scenarios involving rising tensions with China, including the possibility of a conflict over Taiwan. Yes, Taiwan, because Japan would play a key role if China and the U.S. go head-to-head for Taiwan. Now, you might ask, if this is mostly China's, the U.S.'s, and Taiwan's issue, then how come it's a major challenge for Japan? The answer lies in the location of Japanese islands. If we see the map of Japan, we generally know just the mainland of Japan. But in reality, it has multiple islands that are very close to Taiwan and China. In fact, some islands are so close to Taiwan that Yonaguni Island is just 110 kilometers or 68 miles away from Taiwan. This makes it the nearest Japanese island to Taiwan. Although this island is not militarized yet, Japan is planning to build a military base on Yonaguni and extend the airport and port, considering the potential threat from China in case it attacks Taiwan. But the main island that poses a real threat to China is the Okinawa Island. This is because Okinawa alone hosts 32 U.S. military bases, which include 30,000 active troops of the U.S. In fact, Okinawa makes up just 1% of Japanese landmass but hosts 70% of all U.S. military bases in the country. But the thing that intimidates China the most is the fact that this island is just 509 kilometers or 316 miles from mainland Taiwan. So, in case of a conflict between the US and China on the Taiwan issue, these islands are bound to get dragged into the conflict, and even the civilians would suffer. Now, Japan, being one of NATO's partners in the Indo-Pacific region, would definitely back the US in case of a conflict. So, China would definitely try to prevent a U.S. counterattack from its Japanese bases. To avoid getting dragged into a Taiwan conflict and deter any Chinese aggression, Japan must strengthen its military capabilities. But it turns out the real reason behind Japan strengthening its military isn't just these islands. It's also about Japan's survival and existence. If China attacks Taiwan and threatens nearby Japanese islands, they're worried that this will disrupt the supply of advanced semiconductors and block sea lanes that supply oil to Japan. This is because almost 95% of the oil imported by Japan comes from the Middle East. On top of that, Japan is the world's largest importer of liquefied natural gas. Another reason a conflict could be a disaster for Japan is that either it would put their key maritime shipping lane into the line of fire, or Japan would block them. In fact, it's not even just about energy. Japan is highly dependent on the import of natural resources as well. For example, Japan is the largest net buyer of food products in the world. So, in short, China's growing ambitions in the South China Sea and even the East China Sea pose a serious threat to Japan. But Japan is also a victim of China's hunger to grab territories, one of the major reasons behind their deep-rooted hostility. They have an ongoing conflict for the disputed islands called Senkaku Islands. These islands are currently a part of Japan, but China claims it is their territory, and China is in no mood to back off from these claims. This can be proven by the fact that Chinese government ships keep entering Japanese territorial waters near disputed islands. In fact, according to a Japanese broadcaster, NHK, China has made 23 incursions in 2023 alone. China's been flexing its muscles like this to scare off anyone who dares to stand in its way. But the long-term picture of this reality is going to change soon, and the US will be at the forefront of this change. The cooperation doesn't stop at command structures. The US and Japan are also deepening their military partnership through joint weapons development. They're accelerating the co-production of advanced missile systems, including the AIM-120 AMRAAM and potentially the Standard Missile 6, SM-6. These efforts are part of a broader strategy under the Defense Industrial Cooperation Acquisition and Sustainment (DICAS) framework. The idea is to boost Japan's domestic defense manufacturing while enhancing regional security. Producing missiles like the AMRAAM will strengthen Japan's air defense and interception systems. The SM-6 collaboration will enhance the country's ability to counter incoming missile threats. At the same time, increasing local production reduces dependence on foreign suppliers and strengthens military supply chains, all while reinforcing the US-Japan alliance. But this isn't the first time the two nations have worked together on defense systems. They previously co-developed the SM-3 interceptor missile. Defense analysts believe this deeper cooperation not only strengthens Japan's capabilities but also serves as a firm message to regional rivals. Both countries have made it clear they are committed to deterring any aggressive actions, especially from China. Several key elements define this joint deterrence strategy. First, there's the increased military presence along the First Island chain, where Japan's role in regional security is expanding. Second, joint training and military exercises between the US and Japan have intensified. And third, both countries are actively sending a strategic message to China that they are united in their commitment to stability. Japan has significantly increased its military spending recently. US President Donald Trump, while reaffirming the strong military partnership between the United States and Japan, revealed that Japan has committed to doubling its defense spending by 2027. He also pointed out that the US recently approved nearly $1 billion in foreign military sales to Tokyo. But is Japan serious about the security of itself in the region? Because Japan has been a pacifist nation for a really long time. Turns out, numbers are not lying about Japan's commitment. On December 27, 2024, Japan's cabinet dropped a bombshell, not literally, but financially. They approved a record-breaking 8.7 trillion yen defense budget for 2025, about $55.1 billion USD. That's a 9.4% jump from the previous year, and it marks the 13th straight year of defense budget growth. But that number, it's not just about money, it's about intention. Japan is no longer just talking about defense, it's arming up for deterrence. The sleeping giant is finally waking up. But the dragon is already miles ahead. Like it or not, if a war broke out between China and Japan today, China could easily crush Japan, unless the US steps in, of course. According to a US analyst, Tokyo's military posture is still evolving, not quite at the level needed to handle rising regional threats. When you compare their militaries, the gap is obvious. China's defense budget is over $266 billion, while Japan's is $57 billion. China has over 2 million active personnel, while Japan has close to just 261,000. China has more tanks, more warships, and a massive missile arsenal. And while Japan relies on the US nuclear umbrella, China has its own nuclear weapons, estimated at over 500 warheads, with a goal to triple this number to 1,500 by 2035. So, in nearly every category, from firepower to manpower, China has the upper hand. But Japan has a crazy strategy to counter China. Japan is pouring money into something called standoff weapons. We're talking 939 billion yen set aside for this. They're building Type 12 anti-ship missiles that can be launched from land and sea. Japan is working on hypervelocity gliding projectiles to defend remote islands and even developing missiles that can be launched from submarines. While these strategies might seem typical, the plan is to hit enemy targets from far away, deterring adversaries from approaching. Japan is acquiring advanced weaponry, such as the Joint Strike Missile, JSM, from Norway's Kongsberg for their F-35A fighters, Tomahawk cruise missiles for destroyers, and JASSM-R long-range missiles from the US for their F-15 jets. In January 2025, the US approved the sale of 16 JASSM-R missiles to Japan for $39 million, adding to the 50 missiles approved in 2023. However, Japan's weakening yen has complicated these deals, costing the country an extra 123.9 billion yen for American equipment last year due to currency fluctuations. Despite the financial challenges, Tokyo is pushing ahead with its defense plans. It is importing 2 MQ-9B Guardian drones and 6 VBAT drones from the US, which will operate directly from Japanese warships. Simultaneously, Japan is bolstering its missile defenses in critical regions like Okinawa, where thousands of US troops are based. A budget of 533 billion yen has been allocated to strengthen integrated air and missile defense systems, including radars, interceptors, and mobile surveillance units. This shift is part of a broader transformation in Japan's defense posture. For decades, Japan adhered to a symbolic rule of spending no more than 1% of its GDP on defense. However, this rule has been abandoned. In 2024, Japan spent 1.6% of its GDP on defense, and by 2027, it plans to reach 2%. This marks a significant shift for a country that built its post-World War II identity on pacifism. Yet, this transformation has sparked controversy. Japan's Article 9 constitution, established after World War II, renounces war and bans traditional military forces. Critics argue that Japan's development of offensive capabilities undermines these principles. While much of this shift is attributed to the rise of China, Japan faces additional threats from Russia and North Korea. Decades-long territorial disputes with Russia over the Kuril Islands remain unresolved. Russia captured the islands of Kunashiri, Itorofu, Shikoden, and the Habamai Group after World War II, and no formal peace treaty has ever been signed. Efforts to resolve the issue have seen limited success, with occasional agreements on economic activities and visa-free visits. However, relations have soured since Japan imposed sanctions on Russia over the Ukraine conflict. In retaliation, Russia halted peace treaty talks, ended protections for Japanese fishing vessels, and conducted military exercises on the islands. Since 2015, Russia has militarized the Kuril Islands, deploying airstrips, barracks, surface-to-air missile systems, and an estimated 3,500 troops. In December 2021, Russia placed additional Bastion missiles on Matua Island, located just 450 kilometers from Japan. This increasing militarization poses a growing threat to Japan. However, while Russia's military presence is concerning, its engagement in Ukraine and economic constraints make it less likely to open another front with Japan. Despite Russia's challenges, Japan remains cautious, as Russia's close ties with China amplify the threat. However, North Korea poses an equally alarming danger. Under the leadership of Kim Jong-un, North Korea has become increasingly aggressive. In October 2022, it launched a ballistic missile over Japan's Tohoku region, home to over 8 million people. While the missile did not carry a nuclear warhead, its trajectory raised concerns about the potential for catastrophic accidents. Between 2019 and 2023, North Korea conducted over 130 missile tests, showcasing its growing military capabilities. Even more concerning is North Korea's arsenal of 50 nuclear weapons as of 2024 and its improving missile range. In 2019, Japan reported that some of North Korea's projectiles resembled Russia's advanced Iskander missiles, capable of reaching most major Japanese cities. These developments are coupled with North Korea's improving relations with Russia and China. In a recent pact, Russia and North Korea agreed to provide immediate military assistance to each other if attacked, signaling stronger alliances. Japan is also wary of China's influence, particularly its economic pressure and military expansion. With these compounded threats, Japan's defense priorities are shifting rapidly, embracing modernization and strengthening alliances to ensure national security in a volatile region.